Good afternoon to all the commissioners and our special guests. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this emergency call meeting of the Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission. I am your acting chair, Georgia Noon Sherrod. And what I'd like to do is start the meeting very briefly, as we always do, just reviewing the mission of the Human Relations Commission. Our mission is that we work to promote fair and equal treatment of all Anne Arundel County residents and to counteract racism, discrimination, intolerance, and hate bias incidents in the county. And as you all know, if there's ever a time in which we are needed and relevant, it's today. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is exactly 1:01 p.m. In starting this, calling the meeting to order, I'd like to begin with the purpose of this meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss the formal response of the Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission of the treatment of George Floyd, a victim of police brutality and murder, and the countless number of like victims. We would like to make a statement in solidarity against racism, bigotry, inequality, and inhumane treatment of citizens at the hands of law enforcement. Our statement will be posted on our website as well as our social media pages. Second, we want to solicit from the public their ideas on how to address the ideas and formulate actionable solutions in the form of questions and answers during the period of this meeting. At this time, I'd like to have a formal roll call from our secretary, Mary Dodoni. If you would answer when your name is called by saying present.
Commissioner Georgia Noon Sherrod.
Present.
Commissioner Tosin Agabola. I apologize, Tosin.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Mark Aptar. Commissioner Mary Dodoni is present. Commissioner Faye Gaskins.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Mohan Grover. Commissioner Eugene Peterson.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Tony Pratt. Commissioner Khalid Saeed. Commissioner John Watts.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Secretary, do we have a quorum, the majority? Correct, we do. You're on mute. Okay.
This body currently has 10 members. 5 of those members are present on this call.
I count 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Tosin, Eugene, Mary, John Watt, Faye Gaskin, and myself.
You're right. I didn't check myself as present.
Okay.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
We have a quorum and we can conduct business. So now that that's the case, what I'd like to do is introduce our special guests. We have with us today County Executive, Anne Arundel County Executive Stuart Pittman. We have Anne Arundel County Chief of Police Timothy Altamar and Dr. Pamela Brown, Executive Director for the Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families, the local management board. Thank you all for agreeing to be on this call with us today. I'm going to give each of you in that order 3 minutes to discuss with us, specifically to talk on this subject. And then after you're done, we will field questions that have come to us from the public, okay? Also joining us, and I apologize for this, is our county equal opportunity, our EEO compliance officer, Alana Dennis, who serves on the committee with us. Alana, I apologize, but thank you for being on the call. She will, of course, go over the question and pitch them to the appropriate person at the time. So with no further ado, County Executive Pittman, the floor is yours.
unmute myself. Well, I'm glad you're meeting. I was on a staff meeting with Alana and found when your next meeting was going to be, and I thought we needed to hear from you. So I'm glad you're doing this special meeting. I mean, looking back, it was late February when this body held their hate crimes and bias forum at Anne Arundel Community College, and I felt like that was a step forward in the right direction, and that we were acknowledging the racism, structural racism that had put us where we are, and that our county, our community was at least addressing what our weaknesses were. And then when under the stress of coronavirus, and then the killing of Ahmaud Arbery, and then the murder and torture in Minneapolis, I think the pain people have felt is laid bare right at a time when the weaknesses of this country are very clear and obvious, and our faults are obvious. And now we've got people mobilizing, which is the silver lining in all of this. We've got people in the streets expressing their outrage, and at the same time, unfortunately, we have a president who seems to be encouraging conflict and attacking the very citizens who are standing up against an attack by the government on one of ours. And so to say that this is a difficult time is a bit of an understatement. We had a call 2 nights ago with county residents, African-American youth under the age of 30. I invited that group separately because on Friday I had heard at a press conference that our police department, our police chief held with NAACP, United Black Clergy, and Caucus of African-American Leaders. The leaders that were there that were speaking about this incident and about where we stand right now all said we need to hear from younger people. And what we heard from in that forum was hopeful to me, inspiring, and real. And we have to continue that conversation. I got hundreds of emails in a 48-hour time period, and they're still coming in, generated by NAACP Youth and College Division about body-worn cameras. And to me, that was the most impressive mobilization that I have ever seen of anybody in this county, certainly of young people. And I wish I could share them all. I think they're probably considered private, we can see, but every single one was personal and thoughtful. And you can't read those without feeling something very strong, as I did. I'm glad that we had already done the work on body cameras to get a proposal together, because I had fully intended to bring it forward. Now we're ready, we're putting it together and ready to do as a supplemental for the budget. So I thought we were gonna have to wait a year. With the $63 million less in revenue, we were pretty much deferring every new project that we wanted to do. And this made it possible. This is gonna make it possible to move forward on that. It's been rewarding to see the support on the council for that, even among some who didn't before. And so something big is happening out there, and I think we need to use this moment to make some real change in the county, in the country. So I'm glad you all are stepping up.
Thank you, County Executive Pittman. We really appreciate that. I want to also recognize that we have two commissioners that have come into the call. Khalid Saeed and Tony Pratt have joined the call. Thank you for joining us. At this time, I'd like to give the floor over to Anne Arundel County Chief of Police, Tim Altamar. Chief?
Thank you for having me, ladies and gentlemen. Madam Chairman, thank you for the invite. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you and talk today. Clearly, now is the time and here is the place in our national history to make this discussion happen in a positive way. I'll tell you at the outset of my comments that there is a chief of police from somewhere in the Midwest, and I can't remember. And his quote was about the most like my thinking that I've seen since this atrocity in Minneapolis. And he said, if you wear a badge and you're okay with this, you should turn your badge in. So that's where we are as a police department in Anne Arundel County. I confess to the commission that I am depressed, disheartened, and heartsick. We have done so much work in 5.5 years to try to show the people of Anne Arundel County who we are as their police department. And I feel like so much of that has been undone by this idiot in Minneapolis and his co-workers who did not find the courage to do what they should have done, which was stop him. So as we move forward in the discussion, I'll be happy to answer any questions. I do want to commit publicly once again that our Anne Arundel County Police Department is committed to being different from what we saw on that video. I think being where we are in the country helps us to stay on the forefront of positive policing techniques. I think we set the standard for many police departments across the country. The National Capital Region, by proximity to the Capitol, demands quality policing. We see holes in that. We see problems with it. The Anne Arundel County Police Department does not care what color someone's skin is, who someone loves, how they pray or whom they pray to, how much money they make, what kind of neighborhood they live in. We're 100% committed to providing equal service to all. Human life is sacrosanct to the Anne Arundel County Police Department. It is literally inculcated in our officers to have that mindset as they go out and about every day. Every life matters as much as every other life in this county. And the taking of a human life is a failure of us as a society every time, and we know that. We engage in Herculean efforts to avoid those situations. I have in front of my computer right now 2 binders full of cases in the past 5.5 years since I've been chief where we were successful in avoiding using deadly force when it would have been justified. We're committed to keeping that going and being responsive to our community. You have my word on that.
Chief, thank you for your comments. I'm certain that there are a lot of questions for you. It may even seem unfair and unbalanced, but considering that we're dealing primarily with a law enforcement issue, I'm sure you're prepared. I want to thank you for having our liaison on the call with us today. Major Goodwin, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you being here. I also want to recognize that Mark Apter, Commissioner, has joined the call as well. At this time, I'd like to turn over to have a few comments. My counterpart, Dr. Pam Brown.
Hi, Georgia. Hi, everybody. If I'd known you were going to ask me to make a statement, I would have probably said no. Because the last time I tried to make a statement about this, I couldn't get any words out and I ended up in tears. And that was with my staff last Friday. I know many of you know that I have a majority African-American staff. We've been together for 11 years. We just a very, very close group of people. And I've spent the last 3 years with them working night and day on food pantries and just doing incredible work for the county. And it's not that I don't understand racism in this country. I've been talking about it. I'm a white person. I know I'm racist. I understand it. There was something about what happened that just opened up everything that is wrong. I can't find another way to say it. And I've been trying to talk about Mr. Floyd and everything it means. And I've talked to my staff, and my staff always do me the honor of being very honest with me about being African American in America, and they just honor me with that. And I talked to Tracy yesterday, and I said, I still haven't made a statement because I don't know what to say. And she said, well, you talk from your heart, Pam, because that's who you are. So let me tell you, I'm just ashamed. This is my adopted country. I wasn't born here, I came here. And English people ask me, what is going on, Pam? Is it really that bad? And I don't know what to say anymore because I chose to be here. All I can say to everybody is, it feels like this event in the middle of this pandemic has taken the lid off all of it, all of the things that we've been talking about for such a long time. I can't help it. I can't help how I feel about it. I just feel so sad. I'm so sad. I'm sad for all my friends, and I'm sad for my staff, and I'm sad for my adopted country. And I don't know what, and I'm so sorry because I know I'm just a mess, and I'm not usually like this at all. Those of you know me, you know I'm not like this. But I don't know what to do anymore, and that's just the truth of it.
Mm-hmm. So Pam, I do know you very well. Full disclosure, we have a very close relationship, and I think that you're like most of the people in this country, that we are sick and tired of seeing the same thing over and over again, happen over and over again, and not having a solution to the problem. As a Black woman, and as many of the members on this commission are quote unquote minorities or work with minority communities, we're in the trenches every day. We live in the communities. We are appointed to this commission to do something. And so, such as a time as this, we have to step up and do something. With that in mind, the county executive has issued a statement. And so, again, the purpose of this call today is for us to make a statement that racism will not be tolerated, whether it is in the police department, whether it is in the county executive or any county agency, whether it be against youth, whether it be against people who are incarcerated. We have to make a stand as it relates to equal treatment of all people. And so that's what the purpose of this call is today, is to make a statement. Where I'd like to go with this next, I want to thank you all for joining us, but I'd like to turn this over to Alana so that we can start getting to some of the questions specific to our residents and hear from them. And then, of course, I'd like to hear from our commissioners as well. So if that is okay with everyone, Alana, if you would start and then direct the question to the appropriate party. And I would recognize if you would raise your hand, commissioners, if you have an additional question of that person, I'll be happy to recognize you at that time. Alana?
Yes, thank you. I hope everyone can hear me well. Yes? Okay, perfect. So my name is Alana Dennis. I'm the EEO director for the county, and I'm also the human relations officer, an ex officio, non-voting officer, but affiliated with the Human Relations Commission. Thank you for the opportunity. Let the questions begin from some of the community members. This is more so the first question directed toward the county executive. Many civic organizations have been advocating for a civilian review board. especially in lieu of the current climate in our nation. Are you opposed to the fact that Anne Arundel County is in need of a civilian review board? And I say this, let me just preface this. I said that it was directed first to the county executive. I think that that he would be the first point of contact. But Chief, I believe also they're asking this question to you as well. And this is, I'll start with there. County executive, go ahead. Are you opposed to the fact from this question that Anne Arundel County is in need of a civilian review board?
So I have, when I've been asked this question in the past, I have said, and I'll continue to say, that it's a question about what the best structure is to oversee the police department's work. Well, there are two parts to it: to have community engagement, but also to have a way to make sure that the police department is, disciplining its officers appropriately when they act inappropriately. I think that's the goal. And I've had conversations with the police chief about this. I've had conversations with a lot of people about this. I've looked at some of the different models out there in the country. And I'll tell you what my greatest fear is that if we create a body that's appointed by an elected official, most of the models I've seen, they're appointed, they're not elected. Or even if it were elected, there may be an issue with this as well. In a county that is about 80% white, where the politics swing back and forth, the composition of that civilian review board, we would have to be very careful about. And I actually have some fear about what a civilian review board might do, as opposed to in the same way that if we didn't have judges and we had sort of a system without the kind of the protections of lawyers engaged and law. So I do have some fears about it, and I know that we have some civilian boards that interact with the police department. And what I really want to do is continue to look at, and maybe take a fresh look at, maybe get an outsider to come in and take a look at the system in this county and how we operate, to make sure that there is real civilian oversight of the police department. I know how it works now is that the ultimate authority is my office, who fires the police chief if he thinks that, or she thinks that the police chief is not doing their job. And I know that the chief can talk about some of the other mechanisms within the police department and how they function and how the community can be engaged. But in an 80% white county, I think we have to take a hard look at how something like that might work. And I don't want to make a mistake on this, because not only do we want justice, but we have police officers who I've got to say, they have a hell of a difficult job right now. And actually this morning I started a letter to police officers. I'm sure it'll be an open letter, having talked to a lot of them right now about the difficult situation they're in. They can't speak out. Their job is to enforce the law, and they don't get to choose which laws they enforce. It's a lot of them have been affected by the racism in this country as well, and it's a really, really difficult place to be right now. And so I guess my answer is, I know I sound like a politician trying to get around it, but I have real concerns about what the impact of it could be, and I want to talk about it. I want to talk about the best system, but I really worry about what would happen if the wrong people were on a board like that.
Chief, did you want to have an opportunity to respond before I kind of get to another question and a follow-up?
Sure, but I promise I'll go quick, Ms. Alana.
Mm-hmm.
So as the county executive said, I have some fears with the civilian review board models that I've seen around the country. I have absolutely zero oversight with the fact that police are responsive and need to be responsive to their community. In fact, the father of modern policing said that the police are the community and the community are the police. And if we kind of mess that up, we're really in deep trouble. So I think there is a feeling out there that we do not have civilians involved in our review processes, and that could not be further from the truth, whether it's officers getting injured and needing the county to make decisions on how to best help them, whether they can keep serving. There's civilians involved in that process all day long. Our deadly force review, there are civilians on every deadly force review board, shooting and or another use of deadly force review board to make sure that we're considering the civilian considerations for this stuff. I also have two chiefs advisory bodies, a business advisory body and a civilian citizens advisory body that I run things past to help me make decisions. I am fearful of a couple things. At the end of the day, when something bad, horrible happens, like it did in Minneapolis, the cops absolutely need to be held accountable. Firing those cops was the right thing to do, and prosecuting them is the right thing to do. But it's civilians who are going to do those things at the end of the day. It's lawyers, judges. So the civilian review process is actually very robust. I am fearful of having the people who make binding decisions upon the chief who have never dealt with somebody trying to hurt and kill them being the last word when I have had people trying to hurt and kill me. And I know what a cop's feeling in those moments, and I know what a cop has to do to stay alive in those moments. I am not dead set against some sort of progress moving forwards in the area. I think it takes a measured approach, and I think we need to talk about it. And I don't think we should do a visceral rush to anything in this county based upon what happened in Minnesota. It is just as wrong to stereotype the 850,000 police officers in this country based upon those people as it is to stereotype any other group. So I would urge us to think before we talk. I would urge us to, as we move forward, do so in a measured manner. And remember that what we try to do in this business is investigate things dispassionately based upon the facts that come out after the end of the investigation. And I applaud the chief in Minneapolis is doing what she did to get those bad apples out of her bushel basket. I do the same thing on a daily basis. I do think we could make some progress on laws and transparency. The Maryland Chiefs Association this year gave a proposition to the legislature about increasing transparency so that folks know we're doing the right thing in the profession. I've been chief about 5.5 years. I have forced about 35, 38 cops off my police department because they weren't fit to wear my uniform. 2 of those instances I would characterize as overt racism. And in both those instances, we worked extremely quickly to get that bad apple out of our bushel basket. I think I answered the spirit of the question, Ms. Alana. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I had a follow-up question with regards to that because clearly the running theme of several questions surround this concept of the civilian review board, as well as body cameras, which another running theme as well. And in the interim, as we are dealing with these difficult questions, times where people are really, as they say, we can't breathe, and there's fear, of abuse of power at all levels, systematic racism, but abuse of power, including police, right? Police abuses and brutality. And by no stretch of the imagination, I know that none of us here, we know they're bad apples. We know that you've been out there in the community, Chief, and there's so many good police officers. And so we are not suggesting, in the questions I'm seeing, and when I say we, the commissioners or me or the questions I'm seeing, I don't see anyone suggesting that all police officers are bad or any of that nature. But there is a serious concern as to how is talking of community engagement and um, community being involved in some component. If someone has a concern or a question, or as it relates to an abuse, alleged abuse involving a police officer, what is the process? Who does review that? Um, that's one question in the current process. Can you kind of flesh that out just a little bit more, Chief?
Sure.
Mhm.
So as it stands right now, there are two ways that the complaint process works. State law right now says that internal investigations, so we have administrative investigations on officers who do something wrong, and then we have criminal investigations that might also be on the same incident where the officer did something wrong. The internal investigation under state law has to be done by a police officer. The criminal investigation, because cops are who investigate crimes, generally falls to particular units within police departments. In our police department, I have a professional standards unit with our internal affairs unit. And then I have our Homeland Security and Intelligence section of detectives who I generally assign sensitive investigations of any nature to who handle the criminal investigation. I do understand that there's a feeling out there that people do not trust sometimes the police to do fair and impartial investigation. I will tell you this. The Anne Arundel County Police Department does do fair and impartial investigations. We look at every aspect. I'll point to a recent complaint that we got from the NAACP on officer conduct in our Eastern District. We were able to show the NAACP a video that painted a very different picture of conduct than what was being reported in the complaint. But the officers did not report what they did correctly. And so not only did we investigate the complaint, but when we found that they hadn't done the right thing from A to Z, we held them accountable for that. So we really do work very hard to instill accountability on the police department. Okay. And I think if you'll look at recent history, without talking about an open prosecution, you've seen that there was a Anne Arundel County police officer arrested in the past few months. That case was brought to us by the FBI, and the FBI did not find that that case rose to the level for a federal prosecution. The federal courts really only take slam dunk cases.
If I may, and I just want to make sure I correct for the record, because I actually am looking at some of the comments and the feedback and questions of the community members, and I think I just wanted to make sure I clarify, because that what I'm understanding as relates to the Civilian Review Board requests and questions running theme that I'm receiving is that they're asking for independent, impartial body, so and I know that that's there's a concern that you that was expressed, but I just wanted to make that notation for the record.
Understood.
Right. And then the next question, just when you maybe can combine what you're about to say with this question too, because I want to tap back to the Deadly Review Board, wherein you mentioned that there were some, community members on that. Do the members have voting rights, on that, or how does that work? Explain that briefly to people so that we can understand what that process is. And this is instances, the Deadly Review Board, where a law officer has, in the process of performing their duty, there's been a killing, correct? Okay,
Yes,
ahead.
ma'am.
Yes, sir.
So to finish up on the other part of the question, the Anne Arundel County Police took that case forward and prosecuted it on the cop who had done wrong. So as it stands under state law right now, a fully independent civilian review board with subpoena powers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is contrary to the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights under state law. So we would have to do an iteration as it stands right now, somewhere short of that. There are iterations where it's binding upon the chief. There are iterations where it's advisory to the chief. And certainly the conversation as we move forward in time, I think is worth having. I lost myself, Miss Alana. Oh, the Deadly Force Review Boards. I was trying not to throw you under the bus. I think you were the one who sat on our last Deadly Force Review Board.
Yes, and I have sat, you are correct. I've sat on it, and the former Human Relations Officer did as well, Ms. Yvola Peters. Yes, that is true. Go ahead,
So
sir.
in the Deadly Force Review, you are a full member of the Deadly Force Review Board. You correct me if I'm wrong, Miss Alana, because I haven't looked at it in a while. And if I'm wrong, I'll admit I'm wrong. But you sit through the whole briefing that the police department decision makers get on exactly what happened, why it happened, how it happened. And then not only that, we look at ways we could avoid it happening in the future. And unless I'm wrong, you do get a vote in the last time I sat in one, I recall a civilian member getting a vote in the decision-making process moving forward. So there is a civilian voice there, and it's part of our accountability process. And it has just as strong a voice as any other member. That member has just as strong a voice as any other member.
Yes, and I do get a vote and information is provided, and we review and discuss that. I do think that the question also is from if there is ever a possibility to expand or increase the number of representatives on that deadly review board, the Deadly Force Board, beyond just one or two.
Totally open to looking at options on that.
Okay, from the members of the community. Okay, perfect. Moving forward, I wanted to ask another question since we've, because there are several other questions. I want to make sure we at least get to a few more here. Chief, I think you mentioned the process, and I want to make sure that we all got it as far as if a community member has a concern currently of a police officer's abuse of power, is that automatically go to internal affairs, or I just want to make sure I understand it as well, because someone had asked, one of the members of the public wanted to make sure they asked those questions about that process, kind of fleshing it out a bit more with internal affairs.
So yes, the answer is yes. When you hear the word racist or bias or abuse of power, it is going to internal affairs and it is going to be formally investigated. Mm-hmm. We make sure that we have our internal affairs section to be reflective of the community. We pick very intelligent, smart, and experienced officers who are committed to holding people accountable. It is not a very popular job on the police department. It has to be the right type of cop that goes in to do it. But they do it very well. And yes, ma'am, everyone where you hear words like that mentioned, it is 100% getting assigned as an internal investigator.
Okay. And what if a person has in the community, the follow-up question was a concern as relates to the findings of internal affairs? What's their next step or level of appeal if that is the case? Where else can they go to report concerns of a police alleged police abuse?
Yes, ma'am. So and I should have mentioned this earlier and forgot to. The kind of second body that's empowered under state law to investigate cops is the state prosecutor's office under the attorney general's office. So if a person was not satisfied with the outcome or didn't have faith in the outcome, they could certainly go to the state prosecutor's office. And generally what I think would happen, and I'm not speaking for them because I really don't get to talk to them weekly or anything. But in the past, what's happened is they've come down to us, taken a look at things. If they think there's a problem, they would certainly do an investigation. It was the state prosecutor's office that investigated our former chief of police and our former county executive and held them accountable under the law.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to switch over to the county executive. I'm give you a reprieve, Chief, from this. And county executive, just some questions have arisen as relates to the role of the Human Relations Commission and the scope of authority on discrimination issues within the community that the Human Relations Commission currently has. So what does in your plan, in your vision, as relates to Human Relations Commission, do you plan on expanding the scope of their current authority to include the review of discrimination cases beyond what is currently fair housing, but other aspects of discrimination?
Yeah, I've not seen a proposal to do that, but I'd love it if somebody would put one together so that we can look at that. As you know, the Human Relations Commission was disbanded and reorganized so that we could actually put it into the county code so that it could have the authority to do housing enforcement when we passed our fair housing bill this year. So we would have a body to do the enforcement on that. I know other human relations commissions in other jurisdictions do have subpoena authority and review cases outside of housing. And so if there's a proposal for that, I haven't seen it, but that could be the next step. To be interested in seeing it. So please put something together for that if this group wants to move in that direction as well. Let me quickly jump back to a little bit back into the policing issues in that one issue that we are going to be looking at, I know, as we implement body cameras, is what are our guidelines for viewing body camera footage. And that's going to probably get us into some of the same territory about, who sees it and how is it handled. So there's going to be a lot of information about the nature of our policing out there. And so we'll have to figure out how to use that information effectively.
Mr.
Okay.
County Executive, this is Chair Georgia Noonshide. So just a clarity on two things. I'll start with the first thing you mentioned, which is the expansion of the scope of the authority of the Human Relations Commission. We have been talking about this since December of last year as a group, as a body. We were under the impression that you did have a proposal, but not to mince words on that. We will have that to you shortly. In fact, during our last meeting, we had the county attorney on the call with us during our training. We discussed the advisory role of the commission. And so rest assured, we will place a proposal in your lap very, very soon. On the second issue of the use of information, body cameras and things like that, there are other counties and municipalities that are doing this. And so I guess what I'd like to know is, I'm hoping rather not know, that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. There are areas that are doing this very well. And the chief and I've had these conversations. I'm hoping that we're basically looking at who's doing it well and plugging that in versus attempting to reinvent the wheel. Can you speak to that?
Well, not only has the police chief been looking at it, but the state's attorney has as well. And the budget that we're about to put forth for body cameras includes a staff of people who will be reviewing the footage. So, but the chief could speak to whether there are unanswered questions still and how we're going to proceed in making those, setting up those guidelines.
Chief?
Thank you, sir. So that's exactly 100% right, Madam Chairwoman. the two counties, we pulled best practices from a bunch of jurisdictions. The two counties that we really think have put enough investment into the program and have done it right are Montgomery County and Baltimore County. And we are kind of hybridizing the program off both of their programs, if it makes sense. I think as you look at the program, there are always unintended things that come up. So for instance, Annapolis City had problems with, I can't make this up, bathroom footage of their officers getting released to defense attorneys and stuff. So we've really looked at that kind of unintended consequence to avoid. I think we've got a great plan. The county executive's been very supportive of the fact that not only the body cameras are not the thing that either costs a lot of money or takes a lot of work. The data is what takes a lot of money, and it is teraflops of data that come in when you start talking about 800 officers having body cameras, if you think about it. So we're looking at trying to do the data storage right. And then with body cameras comes about an 800% increase in Maryland Public Information Act requests for the footage, the data. So we need the staff to handle that in a timely and legal and transparent manner so that people aren't waiting 45 days when they request footage. So the county exec's been very supportive to make sure we get the people we need. And then the second part of that is that the state's attorney's office needs a whole new staff to deal with all the issues involved with using the body cameras as evidence. So for instance, there's privacy concerns for members in a home on a domestic dispute, things of that nature. So we've ironed out a lot of wrinkles. Montgomery County and Baltimore County really seem to have been doing it right. And that's kind of where we are. So we haven't reinvented the wheel, and everywhere we can, we're stealing good ideas.
Thank
Now we don't have Ann Colt-Litis, the state's attorney, with us, but she has done a lot of work on this in the last year and makes a very compelling case for how it can improve the performance of her attorneys and be used in court.
Okay, we appreciate that. Alana, the question that relates to the HRC, could you pitch that over to Eugene, please?
Yes, yeah. Eugene, as relates to the Human Relations Commission, does the commission have the authority to allow hearings on all discrimination matters, not just fair housing? And if so, has that authority to have open hearings on discrimination concerns in general? What does it look like? You know, will the commission in fact have a hearing on the Civilian Review Board in Anne Arundel County, this issue? So I think people want to know in the community, what is the commission currently doing since the last forum, and what are the plans that the commission has to move forward as relates to community hearings, meetings, and things of that nature and other forums?
Thank you, Eugene Peterson, Commissioner, Human Relations Commission, Anne Arundel County. We do have the ability to hold public hearings, and we could collect information as we did during the forum on hate bias. And we also have the ability to make recommendations to the county executive after reviewing the comments and concerns of the hearings that we would hold. And currently, we're working with the Human Relations Commission in Annapolis to help sponsor a public hearing or hearings that will address a variety of issues related to hate bias concerns in Annapolis, which is the larger part of County Council District 6. So those are the kinds of things we can do in terms of where our recommendations would go. My understanding is they would go to the county executive. And then if there were recommendations for legislation like a civilian review board. That would then be in the county executive and the county council's bailiwick to either the executive to propose and the county council to dispose of that, or both of them to propose and concurrently dispose of whatever configuration that such an organization like a civilian review board would take, given all the additional information that we've heard today from the chief and the county executive. But yeah, we do have the ability to hold public hearings and make advisory recommendations to the county executive.
Okay, good. And thank you for that, because I think a question just arose, and I think people are confused because they know of the subpoena and enforcement power as relates to housing, fair housing issues to be specific. But I think the confusion sometimes arises in the community as to, oh, is the commission also have some aspect of authority as relates to other discrimination and concerns? So I guess my question is, and you know, it's not even a question. I know the answer, so I'm going to say, ask you, but make a statement. It's my understanding that the commission has clearly, under the new regulations, fair housing authority, but also there is authority to have meetings, as you said, hearings on other discrimination matters, but you just don't have the subpoena power, the enforcement power. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And as our chair, Madam Chair said, this is an item we've been actively talking about. And I would imagine there will be a proposal from us. And I also would consider and think that that proposal would have to include, if you're going to do it right, you're going to have additional staff. You're going to have additional financial support. We're voluntary. We're doing this on our own. And you cannot conduct an investigation without an investigative staff. That's a firm belief that I have. I know the Annapolis Human Relations Commission does their best to do it, but I think you need some help. And there are some models of other counties that do this. And again, that would be a recommendation. However, we couch that recommendation and develop it, that would then go to the county executive, and then it would be the county executive decision of how he would want to deal with that recommendation.
Correct. And let me just make two other questions, I think, just on the top of that. Yes, I'm in agreement as the EEO director and the human relations officer, having two dual hats for the county.
Right.
Definitely need a budget and staff, and I would agree that. I know that the last meeting, one of the commissioners had brought up whether the human relations commission would at one point possibly delve into employment discrimination. You know, so they're all different components of, as we all know on this panel. But let me get to this other question. A community person had sent a question asking and saying the following to, I believe, more so to the county executive. And I'm going to just read the question, if you don't mind, county executive. We've made the call for racism to be declared a public health emergency. What efforts have been made to make this happen? And I know that there have been some efforts involving the health department, but county executive, could you please reply to that question? And do you want me to repeat it? Is he still on?
Sorry, yeah, I'm muted.
Okay, sorry.
No, I got it. Yep. So yeah, we brought on our new health officer, Nilesh Kalyanaraman, who feels strongly, as I do and all of you do, that racism is a public health issue. And when we did our budget this year, the only real growth was in the health department to add some positions to be able to. So there's a new position for Office of Health Equity and Racial Justice, and there are additional people who will work within that office who are just being redeployed within the department, and they've already gotten underway. The Health Equity Initiative on coronavirus has been their first project, and they had 100 people participate in their first meeting, and they've been meeting first every week and then every other week, which is why we have these pop-up test centers going up in places where people don't have access to healthcare. And So there's going to be work going on there. That's where we're housing it.
Right.
I mean, we changed our county slogan. We put up the signs. I think everybody knows about that. The for all. And I saw in the chat here an idea from Monica Lindsay suggesting that we put up some kinds of banners saying, you know, we don't tolerate racism in this county, which is an interesting idea. And I wrote down some thoughts about that. But we are open to, you know, more ideas. I mean, that's why we have these meetings, and that's why we try to meet with people on a regular basis to hear what else we can do.
Right. And I think some of the feedback I'm getting, not from the chat, but just from other messages as I'm simultaneously looking in different directions here, is that, you know, in light of what's going on today, you know, racism is not just an issue, but an emergency, you know, and that's the cry, that's the plea of can you hear me, can you see me, the real me, and really trying to address that in a meaningful manner, you know, that people are saying this is an emergency. And that's kind of the feedback that I'm hearing from the community in the requests and the comments.
This is the
Yes.
chair, Georgia Noon Sherrod. We are now at about 4 minutes before we get into, you know, having to end the meeting. I'd like to very briefly ask the commissioners, I think there are a couple of them. Mary Dodoni has a question, and there may be a couple of others. If you could be very concise. Mark, I see you have a question and or statement, and then we need to decide how to move forward. So Mary, very quickly.
Thank you very much. I have been asking on this chat line about LIBOR, and Chief Altamari, you presented LIBOR as a barrier. I believe LIBOR is one of the strongest in the country, the Maryland LIBOR law. There are certainly those who believe that the LIBOR law and Maryland is an impediment and an unnecessary one to transparency and good relationships with the police. Do you want to comment on the feasibility of taking legislative action to change the Maryland LIBOR?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
So for those who aren't quite sure, what Dr. Dodoni is referring to is the Maryland law referred to as the Law Enforcement Officer's Bill of Rights. It offers some pretty strong protections to officers as they're out there doing their jobs. I think it's important to note that last year, me and the Maryland Chiefs Association all made the decision together to offer a compromise position on potential changes to the Law Enforcement Officer's Bill of Rights. I'm a chief. It's my job to hold people accountable. While I can get rid of bad apples, sometimes it takes a little longer than I would like, or the people that I serve would like. And I don't mean I leave them working in years and years, but there's stuff procedurally that has to happen because of the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights that slow us down. I'll say this particularly. I think our position was a definite compromise on opening up more things to be publicly disclosed when an officer does something really bad. And so, yeah, I think we're listening. The leadership of policing in Maryland and the country are listening. I think we're open to furthering the discussion. I will tell you, Doctor, I have to be candid here. I've got to follow my heart that I don't think the ACLU was willing to meet us halfway at all. And so perhaps those with communication pipelines there might suggest that it's a good idea to meet us halfway. Because there's a place where we can find where people feel like police are giving to be transparent, but it's not everything that protects an officer when he or she does get a false complaint. So, did I answer your question okay?
Yes, and thank you. And I'll save the traffic stops question for our next opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to allow Mark after Commissioner to ask a question. Again, Mark, we can keep this rather brief, but please ask your question.
All right. Hi. This is a question for the county executive. Last Sunday, you made a very strong statement in regarding George Floyd and its impact locally. And you acknowledge that racism is still alive and well in our county. We had initiated some time ago a request that the county underwrite the cost of a professionally done survey of racial attitudes in the county. It would seem that now might be the time to get that actually done. The current surveys of attitudes in the county done by the Anne Arundel Community College, they acknowledge that it's not a big enough sampling, which i.e. is cost, to basically being able to pull out the difference between Black and white reactions to certain questions. So my request is, do you agree, and would you find a way to initiate such a racial attitude survey in the coming months?
Let me say this. Let's work on an outline of what the questions would be and the purpose is, and so that we can then take it as we would have to do an RFP, because there are a lot of companies who do this, and by county law, we would have to put it out for bid. But if we put it out for bid, we have to have a proposal anyway. So a description of what we're looking for. So let's if you all and others could put together what that looks like, then we can pursue it. I want to accomplish something with it if we do it, that it has to be a part of a plan to end racism, a part of a plan to combat racism. And, part of me, to be honest, feels like, do we really need a survey to know it's out there? We know it's out there. So what's the survey going to tell us? How does that fit into our campaign? Yes, if it's going to help us to win this fight, you bet, we'll fund it. We'll figure out a way to fund it. So let's put a proposal together.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. What we will do, in fact, we will hand this over to Mark after. He is the chair of our communications committee. So we will pass this over to him and forward a proposal. He will forward a proposal over to your office, of course, after we have reviewed that and checked all the boxes on that. And okay, I'm not certain if there was anybody else with a question or a comment. Tony Pratt, are you still on the line with us?
Yes.
Did you have a particular question or comment that you would like to make, Tony?
Yes, I have a question for the police chief. What is your investigating process for an officer who has been allowed to resign but has internal affairs for issues with racism and discrimination? How do you vet them, and how do we find them actually on our police polls now?
So that is a great question. And it's one Mr. Snowden and I have talked about a lot. So we do not allow an officer to leave and get a fresh start when there's allegations of racism. If that makes sense. So there's a mechanism through the Maryland Police Training Commission. They are the licensing body for cops in the state. They're the ones that issue the certification. And there's a process by which we flag an officer that we've forced out. Even if they've resigned, they have a red flag on that in that certification database up in Sykesville. And when they go to to get rehired elsewhere, that red flag can and should keep other police departments from hiring them. It hasn't always been that strong though, Miss Tony. I'm gonna be honest with you. Probably 5, 6, 8 years old where there's been teeth to that thing. Been the whole time since I've been chief though, and we never let anybody leave and say, oh, don't worry, we won't talk to people about what happens. When other agencies are looking to hire people, they are invited in to look at every internal investigative file we have. Did I answer your question okay?
You did, in a sense. So once the Maryland police investigates and deems them clear and it's no red flag, do your office actually do any investigation on top of that? Because we are finding these officers in our county and in our city precincts.
To hire them, you mean? To hire them for
Yes.
us. Got it. Yes. So I'll tell you candidly, if a person is red flagged at MPTC, I don't want them. I don't want them. Now, I'll say it again. I've been chief of police for 5.5 years. That's been the stance the entire 5.5 years. I'm not saying that there hasn't been problems before that, if that makes sense. So remember that historically that red flag thing started. Don't hold me to exact years because I can't remember, but it's been 5, 7 years about.
So would it be fair that we need some more checks and balances on top of that red flag process?
I think it would be fair to say that police departments need to use the ones we got.
Okay.
I think that's fair. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying they all do it right. I ain't saying that. I am promising you that we do.
Yeah. Tony, thank you for the question, Chief. Thank you for the answer.
Yes, ma'am.
We're going to have to end here. We will probably have, it will be necessary for us to have a separate meeting, but I want to thank all of the guests that have been on this call today. And unfortunately, we weren't able to get to all of the commissioners, but I would like to end this by saying that we will make a statement in solidarity. This call was really about, about a triple pandemic that we're facing. We're facing obviously the health pandemic. We're facing an economic pandemic. And it's obvious now, we're facing a racial pandemic. The citizens of Anne Arundel County are tired of seeing the same thing on television. We're tired of experiencing the same thing over and over again. I personally have experienced discrimination. Many of you on the commission have mentioned to me situations, and I've talked with you one-on-one. We're in the fields. Most of us are grassroots advocates. We work with organizations and with people that every day, whether they are children in the schools, whether on our jobs, just living while being Black, living while being brown, living while being women. And I've shared this with many of the commissioners. My maiden name is Floyd. George Floyd is a distant relative of mine. But what brought this home to me personally was the fact that my twin brother's name is George Floyd. And so deep in my psyche, every time I see the name on the 24 news cycle, I see my twin brother with someone standing, kneeling on his neck. Racism is real, and we have got to do something to stop this. We have to, as a society, do all that we can to look at the policies in our public, whether it be in our healthcare system, whether it be in our education system, wherever it is. We have got to do everything that we can to promote equal treatment, not just equal, but the ethical treatment of human beings, because these are people's lives. Our children are growing up in trauma. They're feeling and seeing day in and day out that at very young ages, their lives have no value. And if that continues, our lives have no value. So I would like to challenge each one of the commissioners and each one of you that are on this call to work collectively together to solve this problem. We appreciate you, and I look forward to our next meeting, which will be the 18th. Our committees, I am requesting that each one of you get together on your committees and do everything that you can to come up with solutions to address the various issues, whether they be the hate bias incident committee, whether they be the public safety committee, whether they be housing. You know who you are as a commissioner, what chair you have, and which communities that you serve in all throughout Anne Arundel County. County Executive, we're here to advise you. We will do that as best we can. Thank you for approving our appointments and for working with us. We will make sure that we get the revisions over to you. Chief, thank you for working with us. We'll be walking with you on these community walks in the next couple of days. And if there's anything that we can do and be of assistance, please let us know. Thank you. At this point, unless anyone has something else to say, if you would, commissioners, raise your hand. Pastor Watts.
I'm sorry, I didn't have nothing to say, but then again, I do. I just wanted to say this in my closing as a pastor, as a community person, that I believe it's on the heart of God that that we look at racism as a sin and as something that to have control, manipulate, and lie, and to be able to continue to do it over people is a tragedy. And I beg the political leaders, I beg those that are in the health department, I beg those that are in, and I wasn't going to say anything because I didn't want to be on here, and I'm just going to be honest. I didn't want to be on here today. I asked not to be on here as a Black male. And so I don't have, I'm lost for words. I'm lost for words because I'm tired. The community is tired. African-American people are tired. We are tired of trying to prove to others who are these people who continue to get away with the behavior. And I think as a community, if we're really serious about this, if we're really serious about getting this poison out, we have to start listening to those who are, that don't have voices, and then to become, and I want to say this, we talk about these bad apples. These bad apples have been for 400 years able to continue to be bad apples, generations after generations after generations. Either this is a small portion of bad apples, or this is a whole lot of bad apples, and that we're not choosing to talk about. So if it's a few, then those good people, whether you're Black, white, brown, European, whatever you are, needs to start speaking up and say, these are the gatekeepers. These are the people that we need to get out so that we can create peace and harmony and tranquility like God has intended for all of us to enjoy. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you,
Amen.
Commissioner Watts. Yes, someone.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Double amen. And Ms. Georgia, if I can, I would love to get an appointment put together where the pastor and I can sit down and talk some, him and me, if I can, maybe lunch.
I will connect the two of you. Okay, Chief? I'll connect you with Commissioner Watts, and you guys, Pastor Watts, you can talk. So I think we're past listening. At this point, we're talking about action because silence, as we've seen, is deadly. So with that being the last word, I'd like to thank everyone. The time we're going to adjourn this meeting now is 2:14 p.m. Thank you all, and look for emails from me later today. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you.
You.